Welcome back. This time we're talking about The Fate of the Furious, the 8th film in the Fast and Furious franchise. Now I have to say, by the time you get to the 8th installment of any series, it gets to be pretty easy to review a film. Because in the case of The Fate of the Furious, if you like the previous Fast and Furious films, you're most likely going to like this one too. And if you've jumped ship or never liked it in the first place and can't believe that the franchise is still kicking, then you're not going to like this one. And that's essentially the easiest way to gauge this movie because it delivers everything we've come to expect from a Fast and the Furious movie, both the good and the bad. And if the good outweighs the bad for you, then I think you're going to enjoy this movie because it really is a fun, enjoyable popcorn action film as long as you turn your brain off and forget any knowledge that you may have picked up throughout your life about the laws of physics, because this film surely ignores all of it. I've been a fan of this franchise. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's a guilty pleasure because I think there's some quality enjoyment to be gained from these movies, but it definitely is one of those franchises that falls into the popcorn entertainment category. It is just simply a lot of action, some engaging characters, and a lot of slick style put together to entertain you for, in this case, a little over 2 hours. And in that, The Fate of the Furious accomplishes its mission hands down. As I said, I've been a fan of this franchise. I enjoyed the first one, enjoyed the second one, and to be completely honest, I still haven't actually seen Tokyo Drift because nothing about those trailers really drew me in, and I just never gotten around to watching it. I was not a huge fan of the fourth film. I've enjoyed it more in subsequent watches, but my original watching it in theaters and doing a review of it, I was not a huge fan of it and really thought that Justin Lin coming back for Fast 5 was probably going to be a mistake. The mistake actually was on my part because Justin Lin came back, filmed Fast 5, which sort of converted the franchise from its, drag racing roots into a full ensemble caper thriller. And in my mind, Fast 5 is still the high watermark of this franchise. It is incredibly enjoyable. Yes, there are a lot of things that don't necessarily make sense in the real world, and of course, physics go out the window, but that is a fun heist movie with some genuinely solid car chase sequences. Fast 6 ramped up the action and had the longest runway in the history of cinema, but again, that was a lot of fun. After 6, Justin Lin left and was replaced by James Wan, who directed Furious 7. And of course, I think pretty much everyone knows of the death of Paul Walker and how it affected that production. I personally was not a huge fan of Furious 7. I thought the script had a lot of problems, much more so than 5 or 6 combined, and I was not a fan of Wan's directing style for that movie. I did in my written review, because that was before I had my YouTube channel, I gave the film somewhat of a pass on the script issues because of them having to work around the death of Paul Walker and what he had filmed and what he did not. I honestly don't know how much that affected the overall story, but in many ways I gave the film a pass, especially since it did end on a very poignant moment, sending off the Brian character played by Paul Walker through those 7 movies. That movie ended up making a gazillion dollars and is still the 7th highest grossing film worldwide. So of course we knew we were going to get an 8th film. And I have to say, this film definitely is an improvement over 7. If you thought that 7 was sort of the canary in the coal mine of this franchise, saying that it was on its way out, I have to say this film is a marked improvement over that, and one that, again, like I said earlier in this review, I really enjoyed. And I say that as someone who went into this film highly skeptical because, again, I was not a huge fan of the direction that Furious 7 had taken. I was honestly, no offense to James Wan, happy to see that he had been replaced with director F. Gary Gray, who has done such films as Straight Outta Compton, as well as the Italian Job remake. But as soon as I saw the first trailer for this film, my skepticism grew, because the whole concept of the story behind this, and I'll get into the story now a little bit, is essentially our team, our family, and that has been sort of the core emotional structure of this entire franchise, the family nature of this ensemble group of various characters, is broken when Dom sort of goes rogue. And our team now has to fight against Dom. And going into it, not knowing how they were going to handle it, I was again very skeptical, because this is a franchise that has been built around that family aspect. So if they were going to go into this making us think that Dom had actually gone rogue, there's no way we could buy it, because there's just no way that he would just, turn his back on everyone. If they made it where Charlize Theron's character, she's the new villain, this super hacker named Cypher, highly original, I know, somehow had something over Dom, and that's why he was doing it, that was more believable, as long as they handled it in a way so that it wasn't overly predictable, in that, yes, we know that somehow Dom is going to be able to free himself from whatever she has over him, and was going to turn back to the side of not necessarily angels, but the side of our bad guys versus, the bad guys. And very early on in this film, we and I don't consider this a spoiler, because for me, I thought I would have felt better about the film knowing this going in. We learned early on that she definitely does have something on Dom. What it is, we don't find out till much later in the movie, but it gets us to buy into what Dom is doing in this film. So as the rest of the characters are reacting to it, it is that situation where the audience does know more than the characters. But I thought they pulled it off as well as they could, considering this particular story archetype. And from there, we do get some really good action sequences. There's a solid street race, classic Fast and Furious street race. Every one of these movies has to have one. And in this case, they got it out of the way really early. It was a solid race. Again, ridiculous. And there's, nitpicks that you could tear these movies apart. But it was fun. Then there's a series of escalating action sequences. In previous films, we've had cargo planes, we've had tanks. If you've seen any of the trailers, at some point in time in this film, there's going to be a submarine. And to put that all into context, if you think back to the original, The Fast and the Furious, which came out in 2001, the big action sequence at the end was them hijacking a semi. And the foil there was that the driver had a shotgun. So yes, our characters were up against essentially a shotgun, and now they're up against tanks and submarines. So this is a franchise that has definitely escalated. So to kind of wrap this up, if you're a fan of the franchise, if you liked 5 and 6 especially, and thought 7 was a drop down like I did, go in knowing that this is a kind of return to form. There's still plot holes. There's still no regard to physics whatsoever. There is a side plot sort of development with Decker's character, who was introduced in Furious 7, played by Jason Statham. I wasn't a huge fan of. I'll be curious to see where they take some of that moving forward into future films, because there's going to be more of these. But that was sort of like the one thing I couldn't really get over. Everything else I could kind of forgive is just nitpicks and just the ludicrous nature of this franchise. But that was one plot development that I really couldn't get behind. And the one thing that I would say I don't like about this movie. But in the grand scheme of things, it's relatively minor compared to the amount of fun I had watching it. So yeah, this is not a great film, but it is a solid, entertaining popcorn action movie, which is basically what we've come to expect from this franchise. And like I said, it's a definite improvement over 7, which I thought was a low point in the recent history of the series. So if you've seen Fate of the Furious, what did you think about it? Do you like this franchise? Do you like the recent films? Did you like 7? And how did you think it compared to this new film? As always, you can subscribe to my channel, check out some of my other reviews, and until next time, I'll see you at the movies.